The barbecue was in full swing by the time we arrived. The smell of sizzling burgers and hot dogs filled the air, and the sound of laughter and clinking beer bottles was louder than usual. It wasn't just any casual weekend gathering. This one was special. A bunch of us, all couples, had decided to get together for the first time in a while. It was supposed to be fun, lighthearted, no strings attached. Amy and I walked in, and immediately I felt the familiar pull of her hand in mine, as though she knew I could never say no to her. We exchanged polite greetings, made small talk with a few people, and eventually gravitated toward the grill, where Mark and Sarah were flipping burgers. "So, you two finally made it," Sarah called, grinning as she handed Amy a drink. "Glad you could join the fun." "Of course," Amy said, with that smile of hers. The one that could make anyone feel like they were the most important person in the world. I smiled too, but I wasn't really focused on Sarah or the drink in Amy's hand. My mind wandered as I looked around the yard at the familiar faces of old friends. It had been a while since we'd all gathered like this. As we all gathered around the table, my attention drifted. And that's when I heard it, Sarah, half smirking, looking directly at Amy. "So, we were talking earlier about this thing. Have you ever heard of the Celebrity Hall Pass game?" she asked, leaning forward with a raised eyebrow. My brain instantly went on alert. A game? I wasn't exactly sure what she was referring to, but the smirk on her face made me uneasy. Amy laughed, probably at the confused look on my face. "Oh, you mean the one where you get to pick a celebrity you'd be allowed to sleep with? No questions asked, if given the chance? We've been playing it for years. I think it's fun." I blinked. "Wait, what?" My voice came out a little louder than I'd intended. "Yeah," she said, her voice light. "It's just a joke, Mark. Everyone does it. Comes up with their celebrity crush, and you get a free pass. No cheating, no strings attached." "You just say it's part of the game." I felt my pulse quicken. The tone in Amy's voice sounded too casual, like it was no big deal. But for me, the idea of that was unsettling. It wasn't the first time I'd heard of something like this, some version of a hall pass, but the idea that Amy was suggesting it with such ease made me pause. "You've got to be kidding," I muttered, trying to mask the discomfort creeping into my chest. "No, seriously," she urged. "Come on, Mark, you play along, right?" I could feel every set of eyes on me. The others, Sarah, Jack, and their partners, watched in anticipation, clearly waiting for me to pick a name, to play along. But I wasn't comfortable with this, not at all. I never liked the idea of this hall pass game. Sure, it was supposed to be lighthearted, funny even, but something about it rubbed me the wrong way. Maybe it was because I didn't think it was something that should ever enter the conversation in the first place. Amy nudged me playfully. "Come on, it's just for fun. You'd totally pick someone, wouldn't you?" I cleared my throat and looked at her. "Fine," I said, trying to sound nonchalant. "If I had to pick, I guess I'd go with someone like Scarlett Johansson. Not that I ever would." Amy laughed. "Good choice. See, that wasn't so hard, was it?" I gave her a tight smile, but inside, I felt an unease growing, a knot that wouldn't loosen. Was this how our marriage was supposed to go? Could a game like this just fly by without raising some questions? A part of me was trying to let it slide, thinking I was just overthinking it, but deep down, I had already decided that this game was not something I'd ever be okay with. No matter how much Amy laughed it off, no matter how casual she made it seem, I wasn't buying it. The truth was, I wasn't just uncomfortable with it, I was frustrated. And I knew that whatever this was, it wasn't healthy for us. It felt like a crack in the foundation. But I kept my thoughts to myself as Amy nudged me again. "Your turn, babe," she said, her voice light, almost too carefree. I glanced around the table. Jack had his own pick ready. And Sarah, she was all smiles, encouraging the game to go on. Everyone seemed fine with it. Still, my mind raced. What was going on here? Was this just a harmless game, or was it something deeper? Why did it feel like everything about this conversation was pushing a boundary I wasn't willing to cross? I played along, making my pick and laughing it off. But I knew, deep down, this game wasn't as harmless as it seemed. It was something that had planted a seed in my mind, one I wouldn't even realize the importance of until years later. That night, after the barbecue ended and we were home, I laid awake in bed. Amy was already asleep, her breathing steady beside me, but I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. I didn't like where this was going, and yet I couldn't find the words to express it. I told myself I was just overthinking. I always did that, but somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew this game, this hall pass thing, was just the beginning of something I couldn't quite understand yet, and I wasn't ready to face it. 15 years had passed since the night of that barbecue. Life had moved forward for Amy and me. We had built a family. We had kids, careers, and all the responsibilities that come with it. The Celebrity Hall Pass game was a distant memory, something we laughed about on that warm summer night, but never spoke of again. The weight of that conversation, though, had quietly shifted something between us, like a loose thread waiting to unravel. Amy and I were comfortable, or so I thought. It was late one night when it all came crashing down. I had just finished a long day at work. The kids were asleep, and the house was quiet, except for the soft hum of the refrigerator. I sank into the couch, exhausted, and began flipping through emails when my phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was Amy. I smiled, relieved to hear from her after a long stretch of quiet nights with no updates. She had been away at a conference for the past few days. I answered, already half expecting her to tell me about some new development at the event, or maybe just check in to say she was winding down for the night. Instead, her voice came through the phone, laced with a strange excitement. She sounded tipsy, her words slurring just a little, but her tone was lighthearted, even playful. "Mark," she began, and I could hear the grin in her voice. "I've got a confession to make. I'm using my hall pass." My stomach sank. "What?" I said, unsure if I had heard her correctly. "I'm going to use it tonight. You know, the Celebrity Hall Pass we talked about all those years ago." There was a pause, a moment of tension hanging in the air before she continued. "I'm going to hook up with a soap opera star." A cold rush of disbelief flooded me, followed by a wave of confusion. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Wait a second," I said, my voice rising with anger. "You're serious?" "Yeah, of course. I've been thinking about it for a while, and tonight just feels like the right moment. We're staying at this incredible hotel and, well, it's all happening, Mark," she added with a light giggle, as though she were telling me about an exciting new purchase. I felt my mind spinning. My chest tightened, and for a moment, all I could do was stare at the phone, trying to process the weight of her words. This wasn't some joke. This wasn't a casual conversation anymore. "Don't joke about this, Amy," I said, my voice wavering despite my best effort to sound calm. "Are you seriously telling me you're going through with it? You're actually going to sleep with someone else?" "A soap star?" Amy laughed again, oblivious to the fury rising within me. "Oh, come on, Mark. Don't be so dramatic. It's just for fun. You always said it was a game. No big deal." It was like a slap to the face. My mind raced, the same words echoing in my head. "It's just for fun. No big deal." This wasn't a game anymore. She wasn't taking our marriage seriously, and I could feel the betrayal in my gut like a wound that wouldn't heal. "I'm not going to just sit here and pretend that's okay," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I could feel the anger building, but I knew I needed to stay in control. "We agreed on something, Amy. We had boundaries, didn't we?" "Well, I don't think we really ever talked about boundaries, Mark. But this is the night. I'm just being honest," she said, the excitement still in her voice. I couldn't take it anymore. "Amy, I need you to stop right now," I said firmly. "I'm not okay with this. You can't just do this." There was silence on the other end of the line, and then, after a long beat, Amy's voice softened. "I'll call you later, Mark. Don't worry about it." Before I could say another word, the line went dead. I sat there, staring at the phone, trying to comprehend what had just happened. This wasn't the Amy I knew. It couldn't be. My stomach churned, and I quickly tried calling her back, desperate for some sort of explanation. But she didn't answer. I tried again. Nothing. The second time I called went straight to voicemail. And just like that, I was left sitting there, in the cold silence of our home, feeling utterly helpless. The next morning, Amy still hadn't called back. My mind kept racing, the words she had said echoing through my head. "No big deal. Just for fun. You always said it was a game." The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. I reached out to our friends, hoping for some clarity. I called Jack first, my closest friend, whose wife, Jenny, was at the conference with Amy. "Jack," I said when he answered, my voice low, "I need to ask you something. Was she serious about what she said last night?" There was a long pause. "What are you talking about?" "About using her hall pass. She said she was going to sleep with a soap opera star last night." Jack's voice was cautious, but I could hear the uncertainty. I don't know, man. I didn't think she was serious about it. But, maybe you should talk to Jenny. She's with Amy." Wait, I said, my mind racing. What do you mean, maybe? You're telling me you don't know? No, I don't know. I don't know what to say. It's, it's Amy, right? I ended the call abruptly, my frustration boiling over. I was on the edge now, questioning everything. Was this some kind of sick joke, or was she actually serious about betraying me? I wasn't going to wait around to find out. I needed answers, and I needed them now. The silence of the night before felt like it had poisoned everything. This wasn't just a mistake. This wasn't something I could laugh off anymore. Amy was playing with fire, and I was about to watch it burn. Mark stood in the kitchen the morning after Amy's phone call, staring at his phone. It had been over 12 hours since he last heard from her. He couldn't shake the anger and confusion gnawing at him. The fact that she was actually going through with it, using her hall pass, didn't sit well with him. He tried to think back to their early years together, before they were married, before the kids came along. He had always been the overthinker, the one who saw the cracks before they formed. But this was something different. It wasn't just the words she'd said on the phone. It wasn't just the casual, almost gleeful way she'd talked about sleeping with someone else. It was everything. The way she shrugged it off, like it was nothing more than an inside joke between them. And then there was the nagging feeling in his chest, the sense that he had missed something, that this had been going on far longer than just a game. This wasn't about a celebrity crush or harmless fantasy anymore. This was real. Mark's eyes flickered to the phone, still sitting on the counter, now silent. Amy hadn't returned his calls. His mind raced again. He needed answers. He needed to know what had really happened. The only person he trusted in all of this, the one person he could confide in without it feeling like betrayal, was Jack. Jack had always been the guy Mark could rely on, even when things got tough. And maybe, just maybe, Jack could help him understand what the hell was going on. Mark grabbed his phone, took a deep breath, and dialed. "Jack." Mark's voice was tight, controlled. "I need you to do me a favor." "What's up, man?" Jack's voice was easygoing as usual, but Mark could hear the underlying curiosity. "I need you to call Jenny," Mark said, his grip on the phone tightening. "I don't know if I can trust what Amy told me, but I need to know if she really did it. Did she sleep with this soap opera star?" Jack was quiet for a moment. Mark could almost feel the hesitation coming through the line. "Man, I don't know if I want to get involved in this. I mean, Jenny and Amy were there together, but just call her, discreetly. I don't need a big explanation, just ask her what happened. Did Amy leave with the guy? Did she go through with it?" Mark felt his voice rise, a mixture of anger and desperation leaking through. All right, I'll ask her, but you owe me, man," Jack replied, a reluctant chuckle in his voice. Mark couldn't bring himself to laugh. "Thanks," Mark muttered before hanging up. He paced around the kitchen for a few minutes, his mind still tangled in knots. The phone buzzed on the counter, and he nearly jumped out of his skin, only to see Jack's name flashing on the screen. Mark's heart raced, and he quickly answered. "Mark," Jack said quickly, his voice low, "I just talked to Jenny. She saw Amy leave with the guy. I think she did it." Mark froze. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. His head spun, and he had to lean against the counter to steady himself. "What do you mean you think she did it?" Mark's voice cracked, but he forced himself to speak. "She didn't come out and say it, but Jenny seemed nervous when I asked her," Jack continued, his voice dropping even lower. "She said Amy had been hanging around him a lot, and Jenny saw them leave together. She didn't say much else, but it doesn't sound like just a fantasy, Mark." The floor felt like it was falling out beneath him. He had suspected it, but hearing the confirmation, he hadn't been ready for it. He wanted to yell, to scream at someone, at anyone, but instead, he just felt hollow. "All right, thanks, Jack," Mark said, his voice barely a whisper. "I'll figure it out. I just need to know everything." "Yeah, man," Jack replied, sounding unsure. "If you need anything else, you know where to find me." Mark ended the call and stood there, staring at the screen, wondering what he was supposed to do now. Should he confront her? Should he just walk away and never look back? His chest tightened at the thought of how everything had been built on trust, how much of it was a lie. He pulled up Amy's number again. He was about to press call when something stopped him. He knew this moment would define everything. If he called her now, it might escalate into a confrontation he wasn't ready for. But if he didn't, if he waited, the doubt would continue to gnaw at him. Mark set the phone down, feeling a weight settle on his shoulders. His mind raced with all the questions. What happened? How could she do this? And most importantly, was this the end of their marriage? It was too soon to know the answers, but Mark knew one thing for certain. He couldn't just let this slide, not after everything they'd built. And so, Mark began to prepare. He wasn't sure how or when, but he was going to find out the full truth. He couldn't let her manipulate him any longer. Mark sat on the edge of the couch, his fingers gripping the remote with such force his knuckles had turned white. His eyes flickered back and forth between the muted TV screen and the phone in his hand. It had been days since Amy's call, and the silence between them had only grown more suffocating. He had replayed that phone call in his head over and over, each time feeling more betrayed, more lost. When the front door opened, Mark's heart jumped into his throat. Amy had finally come home. He watched her walk in, her face lighting up when she saw him. "Mark," she said, smiling as though nothing had happened. "Hey babe, how's everything? Kids are asleep?" Mark didn't answer. Instead, he reached down and grabbed the small black box from the table. His hands shook slightly as he set it down in front of her. Amy's smile faltered. "What's this?" "Open it," he said, his voice steady but cold. The weight in his chest was unbearable, but he forced himself to maintain control. Amy's fingers trembled as she lifted the lid. Inside was the wedding ring Mark had been wearing for over 15 years. He watched as she stared at it, confusion creeping into her features. "Amy, I need you to be honest with me," he said quietly. "Did you sleep with him? The soap opera star?" Amy's eyes widened, and she shook her head, her lips parting to speak, but no words came out. "Don't lie," Mark added, his voice icy. "I know the truth, and I want to hear it from you." Amy's face flushed, and she shifted uncomfortably, clearly caught off guard by the directness of his question. For a moment, she didn't speak, her eyes darting nervously around the room. Finally, she exhaled slowly. "Yes," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "I did." Mark felt his heart drop. The words stung, but it wasn't just the admission that hit him. It was the way she said it, as though it was just another casual event in her life, as though it was no big deal. "Why?" His voice cracked, and he couldn't stop the flood of emotions rising up in him. "Why would you do this to us? Why would you do this to our family?" Amy shifted, her fingers nervously tugging at the hem of her shirt. "Mark, it's not like that," she said quickly, her tone defensive. "It's just a game. We've talked about this before. You said it was fine." "A game?" Mark scoffed, the disbelief lacing his words. "A game? You're calling it a game? You didn't just kiss someone, Amy. You went all the way. And now you're telling me that it's just for fun?" She looked down at the ground, and for a moment, Mark thought she might finally understand the weight of what she'd done. But then she looked back up, her face flushed, but her eyes avoiding his. "It didn't mean anything, Mark. I swear. It was just one night, one person. It's nothing like what you're thinking." "Then why didn't you tell me about it?" Mark asked, a bitter edge to his voice. "Why didn't you come home and tell me immediately? Why did you wait until I had to find out on my own?" Amy's voice softened, but it wasn't enough to mask the defensive creeping in. "Because I knew how you'd react. I knew you'd make it into something it's not." "It's not about how I'd react," Mark said, his voice ice cold now. "It's about respect. It's about trust. You've shattered that, Amy." He stood up, pacing the living room as the weight of the situation crashed down on him. "You were my wife. I trusted you, and you—" His voice trembled, his anger bubbling up once again. "You chose to disrespect me. You chose someone else over me, and for what? To fulfill some sick, twisted version of a joke?" Amy opened her mouth to speak, but Mark held up a hand to stop her. He needed this to come out, to make her understand just how much this hurt. "I've been thinking," he said, the words coming out slowly. "I've been thinking about everything, and I don't know how to move forward with you after this. I don't know if I can." Amy stood there, her face crumpling in guilt. "Mark, please don't say that. Don't do this." But Mark wasn't finished. He pulled off his wedding ring, the symbol of their years together, and held it up. "You kept wearing this. Did you wear it the entire time you were with him? Was this ring on your finger while you were cheating on me?" Amy hesitated, her eyes filled with a mixture of shame and anger. "I didn't think it mattered." "Of course it matters," Mark said, his voice barely above a whisper. "This ring means everything. It meant everything to me." Amy looked as if she might cry, but Mark wasn't going to let this go. He couldn't. I need you to understand, he continued, that I can't forgive you for this. I can't just pretend it's okay. I can't go back to the way we were. What you did, it changed everything. She stepped forward, reaching out for him, but he took a step back. I don't want your apology right now, Amy. I need you to understand that this is the end of us. I can't come back from this. He felt his heart breaking all over again, but the finality of his words echoed through the room. Amy's eyes welled up with tears, but Mark didn't flinch. I can't forgive you. Not after this. Mark turned away and walked out of the room, leaving Amy standing there, tears slipping down her cheeks. As he stepped outside, he could feel the weight of the decision he had just made pressing down on him. But even as the pain of it all sank in, he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't go back. Not after everything. Mark stared at the phone in his hand, his mind still reeling from the events that had unfolded over the past few days. The confrontation with Amy had been raw, painful, and had only solidified what he already feared. His marriage was crumbling. The love he once felt for her now seemed like a distant memory, a shadow in the wake of her betrayal. As the days passed, Mark knew he couldn't sit idly by and let everything fall apart. He needed clarity, and most importantly, he needed to know his options. Divorce, infidelity, custody. These weren't things he ever thought he'd have to consider. But now, they were the painful reality of his life. He called his best friend Jack, who had been supportive, but there was only so much his friend could do. He needed professional help. And so, after hours of searching, Mark found himself sitting in a sterile, expensive office the next morning, facing a lawyer who specialized in divorce and infidelity cases. The lawyer, Rachel Price, was in her mid-40s, with sharp, calculating eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She looked at Mark with a level of detachment that reassured him. She wasn't here to judge him. She was here to help him through this mess. Mr. Carson, she began, flipping through a folder in front of her. I've gone over your case. I understand this is a difficult situation, but we'll get through it methodically. Mark nodded, feeling a surge of gratitude for her professionalism. She wasn't here to placate him or tell him everything would be okay. She was here to get him answers. I can't wrap my head around it, Mark said, his voice low. Amy, my wife, the woman I built my life with, she cheated. She used her hall pass. She actually slept with another man, and I didn't even know it was happening. Rachel leaned back in her chair, looking at him thoughtfully. You're dealing with something significant here, and it's clear you want to protect your assets and, more importantly, your children. Mark's throat tightened at the mention of his kids. It was one thing to lose his marriage, but to lose them too? The thought made his stomach churn. Rachel continued, We'll need to gather evidence, proof of the affair. You mentioned the soap opera star. I'll advise you to start gathering anything that links your wife to this man. Text messages, photos, even receipts. Whatever you can get your hands on, it's critical if we're going to build a case for divorce. I already have some evidence, Mark said, his voice steadying as the gears in his mind started to turn. I've started going through her things. I've found a few photos from a night she claimed wasn't anything serious. I know there's more out there. Rachel nodded. Good. Keep gathering what you can. We'll also want to focus on Amy's behavior. The more proof you have, the better your case will be for both the divorce and custody. I don't care about the money, Mark said, the frustration clear in his voice. I just want to make sure the kids are safe. I need them with me. Rachel gave him a sympathetic smile. I understand. It's not about money, but the judge will look at your stability, your ability to care for them. The more solid your case, the better the chances for full custody. Mark nodded again, feeling the weight of her words. What do I do next? Stay calm, Rachel said. You need to gather everything discreetly. No sudden confrontations. Let me handle the legal side of things. I'll help you file the necessary papers and make sure we're prepared if it comes to court. Mark felt a small sense of relief wash over him. For the first time in days, he wasn't alone in this battle. He had someone on his side, someone who knew exactly how to navigate the storm he was about to face. I'll start getting more information, Mark said, and I'll keep you updated. Rachel smiled, a hint of encouragement in her eyes. Good. We'll move forward slowly but steadily. And remember, this won't be a quick fix. Be patient and stay focused on the bigger picture. Mark stood up to leave, feeling more confident than he had in days. As he walked out of the office, he already began mentally preparing himself for the fight ahead. His world had been shattered, but he was determined to rebuild it, piece by piece, with or without Amy. The air in Mark's house felt thick with tension. The kids were at school, and the house was unnervingly quiet. Mark hadn't been able to stop thinking about what Amy had done, her betrayal, her indifference to the devastation it caused him. He had to know the full truth now. He had to make sure there was no doubt left. Since his conversation with his lawyer, Rachel, he had started to gather everything he could, anything that would prove Amy's infidelity, every text message, every photo, every receipt. It was exhausting, both mentally and emotionally, but he wasn't going to stop. Not until he had the answers, until he had the undeniable proof. Mark sat at the kitchen table, his laptop open in front of him, scanning through old photos and files. His mind was clouded, his thoughts consumed by the weight of what he was doing. But he couldn't back down. Not now. A ding from his phone broke his focus. He glanced at the screen. It was a notification from his cloud storage app. He frowned and clicked on it. His heart skipped a beat when he saw the photo thumbnail. It was a picture of Amy, laughing, standing next to a man in a club. His stomach churned. The man was unmistakable, a soap opera star, one he'd seen on TV numerous times. He quickly clicked open the image to get a better look. The man had his arm around Amy's waist, and her smile was wide, a familiar kind of smile he had seen her give him countless times. He saved the photo and continued digging. Then, a text message from Jenny, one of Amy's friends, popped up on his screen. He had reached out to her the night before, desperate for any clue, any piece of information to help him understand what had happened. Jenny's message was short and cryptic. "I saw her with him. You need to know, Mark. I can't say more. Please just confront her. It's all I can do." Mark sat back in his chair, his mind racing. Jenny had just confirmed everything. Amy had been with the soap opera star, and it wasn't a fantasy. It wasn't some harmless flirtation. It was real. The weight of it all crashed down on him. This wasn't a game. She hadn't just used her hall pass for fun. She had crossed a line, and in the process, she had shattered everything they had built. Mark shook his head, pushing the thoughts aside. He needed more. He needed something that would make Amy face the truth. Something concrete. He searched through Amy's cloud storage again, this time pulling up old photos. It was tedious work, scrolling through hundreds of images. But then he found it, a selfie. Amy and the soap star, clearly taken in a hotel room. They were close, too close. Amy was kissing his cheek, her eyes closed in the kind of relaxed, intimate way Mark had once believed only he had seen. He froze. His heart clenched in his chest. The reality of it all hit him like a punch. There was no denying it now. His wife had crossed the line, and the evidence was right in front of him. He downloaded the photo, along with the previous one, and opened his notes app. He started typing furiously, making a list of everything he had, everything he had uncovered so far. The photos, the text from Jenny, the phone call from Jack. Mark's hands shook as he typed, knowing full well that his next steps were going to be irreversible. The weight of what he had discovered was overwhelming, but there was no turning back now. He was committed to seeing this through, to protecting his family, no matter the cost. But as the pile of evidence mounted in front of him, the one thing Mark couldn't ignore was the growing sense of dread inside him. It wasn't just about the affair. It was about everything. The years he had spent trusting her, loving her, believing in their future. And now it was all falling apart. He picked up his phone again and called Rachel. He needed advice. He needed to know how to proceed. "Rachel, it's me," Mark said when she answered. "I've got everything. Photos, texts, even proof from Jenny. What do I do next?" Rachel's voice was calm and steady, exactly what he needed. "You're doing the right thing. I'm glad you've gathered this evidence. The next step is to act quickly. We'll file for divorce, and I'll arrange to serve Amy with the papers at her workplace. We need to get everything in motion as soon as possible." Mark's mind raced as he processed the next steps. He hadn't even begun to think about how this would affect the kids, how the fallout from all of this would tear their world apart. But Rachel was right. He couldn't let his emotions cloud his judgment anymore. He had to stay focused. "All right, Rachel," Mark said, his voice tight. "Let's do it." As the days passed, the tension in the house grew. Amy came home from her conference, seemingly unaware of the storm brewing in Mark's mind. She smiled at him, asked about the kids, even tried to make small talk. But Mark couldn't focus on her words. His mind was consumed with the evidence he had gathered, the lies, the betrayal, the devastation. He watched her, unable to shake the sense of anger and confusion swirling inside him. How could she be so unaffected by all of this? How could she pretend like nothing had changed? Mark had made up his mind. The confrontation was coming, and when it did, he would be ready. He would no longer be the man who sat back and waited for answers. He would be the man who demanded the truth. The courtroom was cold, sterile, and clinical, every corner sharp with formality. The judge sat at the head of the room, a man whose neutrality seemed as rigid as the polished surface of his desk. Amy was seated next to her attorney, her eyes downcast, occasionally meeting Mark's gaze across the room. Mark sat with his lawyer, Rachel, his hands folded in his lap, his jaw set. Mark had never imagined he'd be here, sitting in this place, fighting for his future, his family. Yet, here he was. He glanced briefly at the clock on the wall. Time had slowed to a crawl. Every tick felt like another nail in the coffin of the life he had known. Amy's lawyer had spent the last half hour trying to convince the judge that the affair wasn't as serious as Mark was making it out to be. Amy had been drunk, had misunderstood the boundaries of their agreement, and had only gone through with the encounter because of the game they'd played years ago. Mark clenched his fists in his lap, his chest tightening with every word. He had never been so disgusted in his life. When Amy finally spoke, it was with a calm, rehearsed tone. "Your Honor, it was a fantasy. It was harmless. I didn't mean to hurt Mark. He knows it was part of a mutual agreement we made. It was nothing more than a game, something we both thought was harmless." Mark felt a rush of anger. He had to hold it back, though, as Rachel placed a steadying hand on his arm. The lawyer had already explained the strategy. Let Amy talk herself deeper into the lie. The truth would come out. Mark only had to remain patient. "I just want to move on from this," Amy said, looking at the judge. "I don't want this to affect our children. I still love Mark, and I never meant for this to happen. We've always been happy together." The judge nodded, scribbling something down on his notepad. "I understand, Ms. Carson, but it seems there's more to this than you're letting on." Amy's face flushed with confusion. "What do you mean?" Rachel stood up now, her voice cutting through the room with precision. "Your Honor, I'd like to submit into evidence a few pieces of material that may shed more light on the nature of Ms. Carson's harmless game." Mark watched as Rachel placed a stack of photographs on the table, sliding them towards the judge. The tension in the room thickened, and Mark could feel his pulse quicken. These were the photos. Proof of everything. "Your Honor," Rachel continued, "the man Ms. Carson slept with was not some fleeting celebrity crush. We have photographic evidence of her with the soap opera star in question. A man she claimed was just a fantasy. This photo," Rachel held up a specific one, "was taken just days before she left for the conference. It shows her with the same man at a nightclub. They were clearly intimate. Furthermore, we have a selfie of Ms. Carson and the same man, taken during the event, with her clearly wearing the ring she shares with her husband." Mark held his breath as the judge scanned the photos. Amy's face had gone pale. She shot a quick look at her lawyer, but the damage was done. Mark could see her composure beginning to crack. Amy's lawyer stood and raised his hand. "Objection, Your Honor. These photographs are irrelevant. We're talking about a consensual mutual agreement. There's no reason to escalate this into something it's not." Rachel remained calm. "Your Honor, these photos are only part of the evidence. The man Amy had an affair with is not the one she had claimed to be, and we have a witness who will testify that she left with him that evening, together." A gasp echoed through the room as a second round of evidence was brought forth. Testimonies, signed affidavits from club security, and even text messages that painted a much darker picture of the affair than Amy had tried to present. The judge flipped through the stack of documents, his brow furrowed, then turned his attention back to Amy. "Amy Carson, it seems you've presented a version of events that doesn't match the evidence we have here today," the judge said, his voice cold. "Your attempts to minimize the significance of your actions have failed. The affair was far more than a harmless game, and the evidence shows that." Amy's face flushed as she opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Her posture slumped, and she seemed to shrink under the weight of the revelation. Mark's heart pounded in his chest as he watched her, but it wasn't out of anger anymore. He felt something else, something closer to pity. The woman he had once trusted had shattered every promise they had made. He couldn't even recognize her anymore. The judge turned to Mark. "Mr. Carson, you've presented strong evidence, and I believe the court will take this into consideration when making its ruling." Mark swallowed hard. The pain was still there, but now it was replaced by a strange sense of relief. This was the moment that would change everything. No more lies, no more pretending. He had his truth now. Amy's lawyer tried one last time to salvage the situation, but it was clear the case was lost. The truth had won out, and Mark knew what would happen next. The judge cleared his throat. "I find in favor of the petitioner, Mr. Carson. The marriage is hereby dissolved, and full custody of the children is awarded to him. The prenup will also be upheld. This court is adjourned." Mark sat back in his chair, the finality of the words settling in. Amy, broken and humiliated, sat motionless beside her lawyer. Mark stood up, his movements slow but deliberate. He didn't look back as he walked out of the courtroom, his lawyer by his side. He knew Amy would follow him, but for now, he needed to walk away, to leave the past behind. Amy had lost everything. She had broken their family, and now she had nothing left. As Mark stepped out into the hall, his heart still heavy, he realized this was the first time, in a long time, he felt free. Mark's days had settled into a routine. The court case was behind him, and now his focus was on the kids. He dropped them off at school every morning, made their lunches, helped with homework, and kept things as normal as possible. They were the only thing left in his life that didn't feel like a betrayal, the only part of his existence he still felt sure about. Amy, on the other hand, was falling apart. Mark could see it from the outside, even if she didn't acknowledge it directly. She had been fired from her job at the PR agency, the whispers from her colleagues too loud to ignore. Her once flawless social media presence was now full of snide comments from people who had once been her friends. The guilt had caught up with her in a way that no apology could undo. At first, Amy had tried to contact him. She texted. She called. She sent desperate emails, each one more pleading than the last. Mark had ignored them all. He couldn't bring himself to respond to her. Her apology felt hollow, and no amount of remorse could erase what she had done. He couldn't let her back into their lives, not after everything. One afternoon, as he was picking up the kids from school, he saw Amy sitting outside their house, waiting. Her eyes were puffy, her makeup smeared from what looked like a long day of tears. For a moment, Mark hesitated. He could feel the weight of the years they had spent together, the life they had built, pressing down on him. But the truth of it all, the lies, the betrayal, kept him rooted in place. He couldn't go back to that. "Dad, why is Mom sitting out there?" his daughter Lily asked from the back seat. Mark didn't answer immediately. He glanced at Amy, who was now standing up, her arms wrapped around herself as if to shield herself from the world. "I'll be right back," Mark said, his voice quieter than usual. He opened the car door and walked toward Amy. She saw him approach and immediately stepped forward, her eyes wide with a mixture of hope and desperation. "Mark," she said softly, her voice shaky, I know I've messed up. I've ruined everything, and I know I can't undo it, but please." She reached for his hand, but he stepped back, his gaze unwavering. "Amy," he started, his voice calm but firm. "You've lost everything. You've lost my trust, you've lost our family, and now you've lost me. I can't just forgive you. You betrayed me in the worst way possible." Tears welled in her eyes. "Please, Mark, don't say that. I'm so sorry. I was wrong. I know I can never fix it, but I need you to know how sorry I am. I've been to therapy. I've been trying to understand why I did this. But please, don't turn your back on me. We can still make this work." Mark shook his head, his heart heavy. "You don't get to make those decisions anymore, Amy. Not after what you did. I can't be part of your lies anymore. I have to think about the kids. I can't keep living in this broken mess." Amy's face crumpled. "But we're still family. We still have—" "No," Mark cut her off, his tone unwavering. "Family isn't just about blood. It's about trust, respect, and you've broken both." For a long moment, Amy just stood there, her face pale, her hands trembling. Mark's chest tightened as he looked at her. He could see the woman he had loved so fiercely, the woman he had once trusted. But that person was gone, replaced by someone who had betrayed everything he thought they stood for. Mark's voice softened, but there was no mistaking the finality in his words. "I'm done, Amy. I can't keep doing this. I've already made my choice. The marriage is over. I'm not going back." Amy's eyes filled with tears, and she took a step forward, as though she might try to hug him. But Mark stepped back again, out of reach. "I love you, but I can't love you like this," he said. "You've already walked away from me. You just didn't realize it until now." Amy swallowed hard, her throat constricting with emotion. She blinked several times, trying to regain control, but it was clear it was too late. Her shoulders slumped, and she turned away from him, her head bowed in defeat. Mark watched as she walked away from him, her footsteps slow and heavy. He stood there for a moment, the weight of the conversation hanging in the air, before he finally turned and walked back to the car. As he slid into the driver's seat, the kids asked if everything was okay. He nodded, though he wasn't sure if he even believed it himself. He drove them home, trying to ignore the gnawing pain in his chest. He had made his decision, and it was the right one. But the feeling of watching Amy leave, of seeing the woman who had once meant everything to him walk away, wasn't something he could easily erase. Still, he knew it was the only way forward. He couldn't go back to the past. Not now. The months after the divorce had been harder than Mark had expected. Amy had made numerous attempts to reconcile, sending him messages, showing up at his door, apologizing profusely. But each time, Mark remained steadfast, focusing on his children and what was left of his life. He couldn't go back. He knew that now. This last meeting had been arranged by Amy. She reached out, asking if they could speak one final time. Mark wasn't sure why he agreed. Maybe it was because he had finally reached a place of clarity, a place where he could say goodbye without the emotional weight that had burdened him for so long. The coffee shop was quiet when Mark arrived, the dim lighting giving everything a hazy, almost dreamlike quality. He spotted Amy sitting at a table by the window, her face worn but somehow more composed than he had ever seen her. She stood as soon as she saw him, her eyes searching his face, but Mark didn't return the hopeful smile that crept onto hers. "Mark, thank you for meeting me," Amy said, her voice softer than it used to be, quieter. Mark sat down slowly, his back straight, his hands clasped together on the table. He didn't say anything at first, just observed her. She looked different now, smaller somehow. Like the weight of everything that had happened had finally caught up to her. Amy's eyes filled with tears as she spoke again, her voice trembling. "I'm so sorry, Mark. I know that no apology will ever be enough, but I need you to know how much I regret what I did. I've spent so much time trying to understand how I could have hurt you like that. And the kids. You didn't deserve any of it." Mark stayed silent, letting her words hang in the air. "I thought it was just a game, something to spice things up," she continued, her voice barely a whisper. "But I lost myself in it. I made a choice that destroyed everything I loved, and now I don't know who I am anymore. I've lost you. I've lost our family." Mark's eyes were focused on her, but his mind was elsewhere. He wasn't angry anymore, not really. His anger had faded, replaced by something else. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't love. It was the finality of it all. "Do you even understand the extent of what you did?" Mark asked, his voice even but sharp. Amy's face crumpled, her hands clasped together in front of her. I don't know. I thought I could fix it. I thought I could make things right if I just showed you how sorry I am." Mark looked at her for a long time, studying her face, as if trying to find something he had once known. But all he saw now was a stranger, a person who had chosen something else over the life they had built. "You don't get it, Amy," he said quietly, his voice steady. "You broke something inside me. You broke our family. And you can't undo that, no matter how sorry you are." Amy nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. She looked down at her hands, unable to meet his eyes anymore. I know, and I'll never forgive myself for it." Mark's expression softened just slightly, but his resolve remained firm. He had made his peace with this. The last piece of him that had held out hope for reconciliation had finally crumbled. There was nothing left for him in this relationship, nothing except the pieces of his past, scattered across the years they had spent together. "I don't want this anymore, Amy," Mark said, his words final. "I don't want the guilt. I don't want the lies. I don't want you to keep trying to fix something that can't be fixed." Amy's breath hitched, and she shook her head, as if in disbelief at the weight of his words. "But what about the kids? We have them. We should at least try." "The kids are my priority now," Mark interrupted, his voice cutting through the air. "And I'm not going to let you pull me back into a cycle of pain and uncertainty. It's over, Amy. I'm done." Amy's face twisted with pain, but she didn't fight him. She knew deep down that this was the end. She had tried so many times to repair what she had broken, but the reality was undeniable. Her choices had destroyed everything. Mark stood up, his heart heavy but unburdened for the first time in months. He didn't feel relief, not exactly, but he felt something, something that was missing all these years. The certainty that his future didn't have to be shaped by the past. As he walked out of the coffee shop, he took one last look at the life he was leaving behind. Amy would be okay eventually. She would have to be. But as for him, he had his children, his life, his future, and that was enough. The door swung closed behind him, and Amy remained seated, the echoes of their last conversation lingering in the quiet air. She watched him leave, knowing that this time there was no going back. For the first time, Mark felt like he could breathe,